Hey everybody, welcome to the Digital Imaging channel. Today we're going to be talking about redaction. We're going to define redaction for you, lay out some precautions to be aware of before you start your redaction project, and then also give you a few ideas of how to move forward with the redaction of your documents in a digital format. All right, so for number one, the first step of this video is going to be defining redaction, and I'm going to read actually from our blog here. So this definition is from the Property Records Industry Association, otherwise known as PRIA, and the definition of redaction is the act of covering or otherwise removing from the public record or public view any sensitive, private, or confidential information. Basically, you're obscuring the ability of someone to see something. There is a footnote to this that says, quote, "For electronic documents, information to be removed may be present not only on the visible image, but embedded as metadata tags within the document or the TIFF header. PII, that's personally identifiable information, should be removed from the metadata tags or TIFF headers if any is found there." So basically, the idea is if you're covering up something, you got to make sure that the data behind that covering up, that obscuration, is not still accessible. Like OCR, if it was text searchable before, you're not just covering the image of the text, but actually the text data or metadata, maybe a tag on the file that still points you that information. So those are the definitions of redaction from PRIA. So now we're going to get into some precautions before you start redacting. Just a couple quick points to go over. One, who has the ability to make redactions? Now we're primarily talking about digital redaction. So who has the actual ability to go into one of your digital files and make a redaction? Who's allowed to do that? Make sure you know that and the right people have that capability, because sometimes you might have an application that grants anyone with access to that what's called a document set, gives them that ability by default, or maybe it doesn't give them the ability by default. You want to know who's being given access and when. Next, who has the authority to make or authorize redactions? So it's a little bit different than who can actually do the physical redacting compared to who has the ability to authorize that. So there is a difference. So who has the ability to authorize these compared to who has the ability to actually execute them. Are you redacting digital and hard copy files? So kind of going back to that the definition of redaction of, you may redact an image. That doesn't mean all the background data was also redacted or removed, obscured, however you want to say that. Do you also have a physical copy of that document? An example would be microfilm. Let's say you have some statute that you have to go and redact certain information, and you scanned your microfilm a few years ago, so you have it in digital format. So you go in and redact the microfilm images. What about the hard copy files? Because if you're redacting the digital copies, you can still access the physical copies. So it's something to think about. Are you taking care of all points of information, all the documents that are available with this information? Are you redacting each type? So hard copy, digital, maybe there are multiple digital copies. Be aware of that. In some applications, the redaction may not need to be permanent, in the sense of certain people may redact information because they're going to be sending out a file request to somebody. So they're redacting certain parts of it. That doesn't mean the file has to be redacted for everyone else. So there may be internal folks at your office that still need to access the information, but you can't send it out or provide a document to, let's say, a public records request with that information. So you may be able to undo a redaction in a digital file, redact something, provide that document with certain information redacted, provide that to someone, then go back into the digital system and undo the redaction. You may not want that, so be aware. Can I undo this, or do I want it to be permanent, irreversible, and once it's done, it's done? Those are some precautions it takes, so you're aware of them as you go forward with redacting your files. Now we're getting into some first steps in a redaction process. So I'm going to read off a few things here. What information should be redacted and why? So of course the first step, why are you doing redaction in the first place, and what do you need to redact? Is there a statute, like a state, county, city, some sort of statute order or regulation that requires you to do this, that'd be nice to have and to know what you need to do. Which files contain the information that need to be redacted? Not all your files will have all the information that has to be redacted. So can you separate that out by document types or by file types, forms, whatever it is? How are the files formatted? Like I just mentioned, are they forms where you're going to say every single page is going to be the same layout, so it's very easy to redact the information? Or you're going to kind of have to freehand it and go, read through each document and try to find something to redact that. That's important to know. Are you redacting the information? Is your staff doing it? Or are you hiring a company to do the redaction for you? That ties back to how the information is laid out and which pieces you need to redact, because let's say you hand off a project to a company like us, for example. Say, I want these 300 boxes scanned, these 300 boxes of paper, and I need these types of records with this type of information redacted. It'll be critical for us to be able to know, okay, is the information on the same document or record type? Okay, then these 50 boxes aren't going to be redacted because it's not the record type that includes that information. These remaining 250 boxes do require it. Then within those boxes, which pages, which individual files have the information that has to be redacted? If they're forms, much easier to go through and kind of make a systematic process. If it's just random pages, random files, it's going to be a little more difficult, probably more expensive for someone to sit there and kind of read through and figure out, okay, there's a piece of information I need to redact, like a social security number, date of birth, things like that. So figuring out what information it is and who's going to do it is critical. And then what's the redaction approval and verification process? So once the redactions are made, who's approving that they're correct and then verifying that they're correct as well? So after the redactions are made, do you have a quality assurance check going on to make sure that the redactions are correct, and if you provide this information to another party, that the information is not mistakenly showing somewhere? So do you have an approval and verification process? So those are a few steps as you get started in your redaction project. Okay, this next section is pretty quick. It's what information should be redacted. This will completely depend on your industry and your document requirements and retention requirements, things like that. What information can be kept, shown, what needs to be redacted. It's very dependent on your unique situation, but some common types of data that are redacted. This is just a list of generally what we see when we do redaction for clients. Social security numbers is a big one. Driver's license numbers, dates of birth, or date of birth I should say. Medical record numbers, otherwise known as MRNs. Account numbers, let's say it's bank statements or member statements, or actually student record numbers. That's kind of like an account number, but student record number could be something. Addresses, phone numbers, basically information that's, if you put a couple of those together and you can tie them to point to an individual, that's usually the information we see that needs to be redacted. Those are a few examples. Again, it'll completely depend on your particular case and your industry and your requirements. So any information can be redacted. It's just we need to know what it is and then where it is on the files, and we can do that. Okay, this last section is going to be about redacting a digital document. So what I have here is actually a newspaper from some microfilm we scan. It's public information, so we're not showing anything sensitive. And what we'll use as the example is, let's say I work at a county office and this is some sort of information that can be requested by the public, but certain pieces can't be shown to them. I'll show you how to do that. This is actually our digital reel application that I'm in that has some redaction capability in it. So let's say this is the document that's requested, and there's a piece of information on here that I can't show to the public, but I don't have to permanently redact it internally, because maybe internally we still need to use it. But let's say this section right here is what needs to be redacted. I draw the red box for redaction, and what you're going to see is that I, as the admin, can still see through it, so I can see what's there. I'm not permanently redacting it in this case, but when I get out of the actual image viewing here, that chunk of that document is redacted. So I can see past it, but if someone else was in this application that didn't have redaction capabilities, they wouldn't be able to see through that redacted box. And if I save this as a PDF or send it to somebody, that would be blacked out to them, but I can still see it. And then of course I can go in and remove the redaction, and you can see here that the redaction's gone. So that's just one instance of how to redact digital documents that you can do internally. Let's say you have this application, Digital Reel from us, or you have some other digital application that allows you to do that. It can be something you want to apply to your records. It might be something you have to apply, you're required to apply to your records, but regardless of which reason that you're interested in redaction, we hope you took something away from this video and you feel more comfortable with the process and just redaction in general. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.